Greetings and welcome to the channel. My name is Dr. Narcissistic, transformational coach here at Inner Mileage, where we help folks understand the trauma-informed basis of limiting self-beliefs and how to take inspired action to overcome it right here, right now. Today we're going to talk about how escape from narcissistic abuse awakens your divine purpose and how an empath becomes a conscious creator of their own reality. Because ultimately, there's this moment which is quite devastating when your illusions break. Not loudly, not even heroically, but internally and in a way that is irreversible. Meaning you begin to see what you once called love was a distortion. What you once called connection was entanglement. And what you once called yourself was a fragmented reflection shaped by someone else's unmet hunger. And in that moment, something ancient within you begins to awaken. This is not just psychological recovery, nor is it just emotional healing. It isn't. This is a spiritual reconstitution of your identity. And we're going to walk through all of this in a very rigorous way, based on looking at what actually happens when an empath escapes narcissistic abuse and why that escape is not the end. It's the beginning of something far more powerful, meaning you become a conscious co-creator of reality. So let's go even further. To understand the awakening, we must first understand the system. And narcissistic abuse is not random. In fact, from a psychological lens, narcissistic abuse is an intermittent reinforcement, trauma bonding, and identity erosion framework. And research shows that unpredictable patterns, particularly affection followed by withdrawal, create an addictive attachment loop stronger than consistent reinforcement. So this is the kind of dopaminergic kind of state of being that becomes dysregulated, and then the fear center of your brain is activated. But that's only one layer. From a systems and energetic perspective, narcissistic abuse functions as an identity suppression field, meaning that the narcissist, unable to access a stable internal self, regulates themselves through external validation, control, psychological mirroring, and distortion, meaning they do not see you. They use you as a reflective surface. And if you're empathic, particularly highly attuned, perceptive, and emotionally intelligent, you become the perfect interface, meaning you feel deeply, you adapt quickly, and you seek coherence, which means you unconsciously begin stabilizing their instability. Do you see how this thing works? So when you leave, here we're talking about the collapse of the false self. When you leave, or when the illusion collapses, you don't just lose a relationship, even though you do. You lose the identity you constructed to survive that relationship. You lose the narrative you believed about love, and you lose the emotional framework that organized your reality. This is why many empaths resort to dissociation, to existential confusion, and to a sense of, I don't know who I am anymore. Clinically, this resembles identity diffusion, but spiritually, something more precise is happening. That the constructed self is dissolving. This aligns in Buddhism with the concept of anatta, non-self, which is the idea that what we perceive as a fixed identity, I'm a loser, I'm a winner, is actually a collection of conditioned processes from ambient sounds, from the kid on the playground, from my parents, grandparents, etc., etc., etc. And the narcissistic dynamic accelerates this realization, but violently, because you're forced to confront, I was not who I thought I was. And in that rapture, a deeper question emerges. That if I'm not that, then who am I? And this is where most frameworks stop, because your transformation actually begins beyond the body and mind. And as the false self dissolves, your awareness begins to decouple from your thoughts, from your emotional reactions, from your conditioned reality. This is all supported by neuroscience, by the way. And in fact, the studies on mindfulness and loving kindness awareness shows that there's increased activation in the part of your brain that has intuitive awareness or interoceptive awareness, right? As well as your default mode network, which is the part of you that you refer to as a kind of stasis way of being, shows reduced egoic rumination. Meaning you begin to observe your experience instead of being consumed by it. This is very key. And in that observation, a profound shift happens. You realize you are not your thoughts, you are not your trauma, and you are not your body. You are the awareness within which all of this arises. And from a spiritual lens, this is the recognition of the witness consciousness. From a quantum-informed perspective, this aligns with the idea that the observer participates in the construction of reality. This is not abstract. This is functional, because the moment you recognize yourself as awareness, you step out of unconscious reaction and into conscious participation. Now, when we get even more advanced, if you're awareness, what is the nature of that awareness? See, because across multiple traditions, whether it's Advaita Vedanta or mystical Christianity and so forth, the answer converges that awareness is not separate from the fundamental field of reality. It's not. In physics, reality is described as a unified field. A unified field. It sounds very simplistic, but unified means all in one. Also, physics defines it as a probabilistic system at quantum level. So whatever you choose and observe leads to different outcomes. And if you choose and choose again, you're creating different outcomes. And this is also structured, your reality, by your observation and your interaction with your observations. So in spiritual language, the same field describes consciousness, source, the great architect, the divine. So when you recognize yourself as awareness, you're not just becoming self-aware. No, you're recognizing yourself as a localized expression of the universal field. This is what it means to be a reflection of the divine. Not metaphorically, not structurally, but in an embodied way, which leads to a radical simplification, meaning that you, as my teacher would say, life is not happening to you, you are happening to life. You're not just experiencing reality, you're participating in its formation. And this is where a lot of people retreat, because this realization comes with a cost, and that cost is you're responsible. So if your perceptions, beliefs, and emotional states define your reality, then healing is no longer optional, it is foundational. Trauma is no longer just something that happened to you. It becomes something that must be transmitted through you. And from a neuroplastic perspective, repeated thoughts and emotional states influence neural pathways, and these pathways shape perception, behaviors, and outcomes. And from a spiritual perspective, your internal state is a frequency interface. Excuse me. So how do you stabilize this? You stabilize this through practice, because without practice, the nervous system will revert. This is why conscious embodiment becomes essential, whether it's somatic grounding or cognitive repatterning or meditative awareness or having energetic boundaries. And as stabilization deepens, something extraordinary happens. You stop trying to become something and you begin to emanate something. By the way, if any of this aligns with you, type transform in the comment section. Because what you begin to realize is your presence changes. You're less reactive, more precise, and more grounded. And people begin to respond differently to you. See? So in spiritual language, this is called a transmission. You become less performative, more authentic, and more aligned with purpose. And if that purpose is not something you chase, it is something that emerges as a natural extension of your state, right? This is where empaths transform completely. Before awakening, you serve to be loved. You gave to be accepted. The difference is you move from codependency to conscious contribution. You rebuild yourself and stabilize, and you become light, not as an idea, but a state of being. And from that state, you heal the world. Keep shining and keep rising high. Peace.